Parashat Vayera, the only parashat that it's in the first pronoun. I don't think there was another one, right?
I mean, speaking to you?
Vayera, I appeared. So
Hashem speaking as
yes, I think it's very strong. Like the most of the depth of the appearance of God connecting to us, like it's God is saying, I appear. It never happened in the first pronoun again, right?
Well, for the name of the parasha, no.
No, that's what I was talking
Right. For the name of the parasha,
third pronoun.
Right, you have Lech
Paul,
Lecha, you have whatever, but right, for the name of the parasha, because it's in the middle of a conversation. This parasha starts in the middle of a conversation between.
Yes. God and me.
Yeah. Right, so we started off talking about how the society is disintegrating, and therefore we have to look to Torah for values. So it's a very sensitive topic to talk about, but sometimes people, they turn to Orthodox Jews or observant Jews, you want to call them observant Jews, and they say, well, you say you're so good, look at this fellow did that, look at this rabbi did this, look at this, they find different scandals or something, situations. And therefore they say one of two things. Either what you're doing is not right, the whole Torah or just observance is not good, or they say, this is why I'm not doing it. But the point is, what do you say to that? The other thing is also, you should know something interesting. We had 2 years ago, the head of the OU, the president of the OU, his name is Moshe Bain. He came to visit. And I asked him, are you a rabbi? He said, yeah, no, I got smicha. So I said, why are you not called rabbi anywhere on your OU? They don't call him rabbi. You can search him up. They don't call him rabbi. He's not the head anymore. But anyway, he said because the OU have a policy, Orthodox Union have a policy that if you're not actually a practicing rabbi, you shouldn't use the title rabbi. Why? Because about 5 years before that, there was a big scandal with somebody that one time was a rabbi, like 30 years earlier. Then he went to business and he did some shady dealings and he got arrested. And every article that spoke about him, the top of it was like rabbi gets arrested for money fraud, and the Chilul Hashem, the desecration of Hashem's name, which comes out from that is so the OU said, listen, if you're practicing rabbi, okay, you need the title, use the title. But just to throw around the title like that, it's not good. So that's number one. Number two, you should know when you hear about these things, scandals. So, there's a book we have in the front by Simeon Glabach's father of blessed memory, Felix Glabach. He wrote like a story of his life, how he started off and he grew richer and he helped so many people. So he's got a chapter in there called Rabbis Are Not Angels. It's quite a blunt chapter where he writes all the interactions that rabbis had with him and the terrible things that they did. Not scandal, just like he didn't act to me appropriately and he wanted money, whatever. But that's really the line, right? So rabbis are not angels, but it's more than that, right? Statistically, let's say you look at a basketball player. So they can get the ball into the net 85% of times. It's the same when you look for rabbis, right? The vast majority of not only rabbis, but observant people are ethical people in every way. They are kind, they're charitable. They'll have, the people that I know that we've spoken about this, kindness, they do extreme levels of kindness. They'll have sleep on the floor, I'll sleep on the floor, you sleep in my bed. Sometimes the people that have the most guests are the people that have the least room. And these people have massive houses, never having guests, so it is a fact that the vast majority of people that keep Torah are better people, more ethical people. Not better they're better, but they're more ethical. Will you find a bad apple? Of course you will. Will you find a basketball player that misses a shot, a 3-point? Of course you will. But it's not common. The other thing you should also know is that this is like hard to say, but there's different types of rabbis. That means some people like the reason why when a rabbi does something wrong, it gets in the headlines is because it's much easier. It's a good headline, right? Mm-hmm. Rabbi, whatever it does, there's terrible stories about rabbi at the mikveh in California and money and all there are stories that come up. Now there's tens of thousands of rabbis and there's one story every 5 years maybe. Fine. But that's not, you should know there's different standards of rabbis. I had a story. It's very, very personal to me. My wife's uncle was a rabbi in New York. Sorry, in London. In London. In fact, he wasn't just a rabbi; he was a dayan. A dayan is like a shofar, like you're right, but like halachic, like a higher level. And he built his own shul. He had a massive, hundreds and hundreds of people came every Shabbat, massive following. And it turned out that he was doing a terrible, terrible thing. There was a woman who was married in his community and he was messing around and he denied it, whatever. He had to leave his job. Terrible story. Now, when this came out, a lot of people in England, it's a big, big scandal. It's the biggest scandal in 50 years with any rabbi. People were like, oh, what's going on? Rabbi, how can a rabbi do this? So we had Rabbi Zimmerman, who was at the time the rabbi of Gateshead, speak to us. We were the rabbis in Gibraltar at the time, to tell us how we answer this. How do we explain to people that such thing can happen? And he said something very, very interesting. He said, it was a funny way to say it, but I'll just say it how he said it. He said, I went through a list of all the Torah scholars, Talmidei Chachamim in Gateshead, and in terms of Torah knowledge and righteousness, this big, big rabbi from London, who is like famous and everything, maybe comes in top 60 of and Gates is a very small place. Gates is only 400 families or whatever. What was his point? His point was that often we assume somebody gets the title rabbi, therefore they are something special. Not always. In fact, nowadays, a rabbi is more likely to be a better speaker than to be learned. This is actually, unfortunately, the reality, especially in America. I know people that got smicha in an online course, 2 years in the evenings. They were taking this course. They didn't learn Gemara. They just learned like the cliff notes of the halacha. They didn't even learn like the deeper commentaries like the Pesach Tshuva, whatever. Now, I'm not undermining that. It could be they have the ability to paskin halacha. But when you're talking about somebody who we know as historic to be this term of a rabbi, what we mean is somebody that it's not just took a quick course and ticked the box. You're talking about somebody who is an embodiment of Torah. Is like a living Sefer Torah. Yeah, Sefer Torah we act with respect, not because it represents Hashem. It's part of Hashem. So, unfortunately, people there's no like titles, a PhD with honors. You know what I mean? There's no such thing for rabbi with honors, and it's probably for the best because we as humans we're not supposed to grade other people. But it's important that we know to ourselves that there's rabbis and there's rabbis. There's in fact, there's not just rabbis, there's 100 different levels of where a rabbi could be. Like I've said many times, I knew rabbis that literally were angels. Like not literally, but obviously one level below angel. Like they so you could offer them $1 million, they'd be like, I don't understand. I just want to learn Hashem's word. Like you're talking about people that are completely above and beyond, never watched a video, not interested in any materialism. And I've known rabbis that do sins, and not even embarrassed of it. And unfortunately, for those that don't understand, they think, oh, he's a rabbi, what's the difference between the two? So it's very important to know that, first of all, nobody's angels. But even then, rabbis are, well, not only rabbis, observant people are supposed to be embodiment of Torah values, which is morality and not to cheat on taxes, not to lie, not to swindle, to be nice, never to get angry. Always, this is how people that follow the Torah are supposed to, we know Moshe was humble, we're supposed to be humble. So how can it be somebody follows the Torah and he's a terrible person in business and he's mean and he gets angry so what's the answer? The answer is that just because he does these mitzvahs doesn't mean that he is a complete person. Just because he did a 2-year course and ticked the box, now he's a rabbi, doesn't mean that he doesn't have anger issues. Now, should it be that rabbis don't have anger issues? Of course, because that's what one of the rules of the Torah is: don't get angry, don't be haughty, etc., etc. So it's just important to know that people can get naive and think, oh, rabbi, there's no such thing. Yeah, and besides the fact that I do, this is my theory. I made it up, but I think there's a difference between a gadol hador, which is a truly great person. These are like handful in every generation, and rabbis in general. right? I said there's different levels, but I think there's even more than different levels. A Gadol Hadar, that means one of the greatest of the generation. Don't worry about Yosef. You're talking about Rabbi Elyashiv, Chaim Kanievsky. These are people, Rabbi Arne Steinman, you can check out these names. These are people that I mentioned before are one step below an angel. If you tell me that he did a sin, I will have to see it with my eyes to believe it. Not because I'm naive, the opposite, because I know how detached these people are from materialism. I know that they didn't have a fizzy drink in their life. They didn't have a hot dog in their life. They didn't have a hamburger in their life. They don't even want anything materialistic. You're going to tell me that they cheated on tax, whatever it is you're going to tell me. These people, I do believe, are above and beyond. Everybody else has a Yetzer Hara, like a high level Yetzer Hara, right? Everybody else has an evil inclination and therefore can fall into it. So if you tell me that these people did a sin, and I saw it with my own eyes, then I would question the Torah. I'd say, what do you mean? You have somebody so connected to Torah, do something. Everybody else, okay, this guy learns 1 hour a day, this guy learns 2 hours a day. These, fine, but he's still, these people learn 18 hours a day. They're completely connected to Hashem on a different level. So, it's not comfortable to say this, by the Sephardim especially. They respect their rabbi to the 100%, the most. And sometimes, I'm not saying, but sometimes it backfires. What does that mean? There was stories, I'm not going to say names, but certain families of very, very rich, influential rabbis in Israel who used their positions to accumulate a lot of money, and everybody that came into him had to give a big donation. One of these rabbis ended up being stabbed because somebody went to him for a blessing. And the rabbi said, "I'll give you a blessing is for business, but you have to give me a lot of money." You're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I guarantee you the blessing will work. And the blessing didn't work. And the guy was so angry, he came in and he stabbed the rabbi. So, obviously it's terrible story in general, but, that's, blind faith, especially in leaders, goes both ways. That's where you see the downside of it. When you're blind and you think, oh, he could do no wrong, despite the fact that he's asking me for $10,000 every time I talk to him, that's not at least the path that I like to follow. For some people, simpler people, maybe that is the right path. But for us, doesn't mean always be judgmental, always think negatively of people. But I think it means keep it real. You know what I mean? Like, if he's asking for a lot of money, he's obviously interested in money. Let's be real. This is not for Hashem. You know what I mean? So, the famous joke about all the pastors in the church. They talk about how terrible money is, terrible money. So give it all to me. Mm-hmm. And you have these pastors that have private jets. They have mansions. There's a story now going on with this huge leader from, I think it's one of the South American countries, maybe Argentina. He has a church that's the size of a stadium, has 75,000 seats, and he has private jets, massive, and he got arrested because of all the immoral things he was doing with young and old and children and trafficking, and because this is insane, but people fall for it. But I think we have to have an open mind, but you also have to know that just because I have a Yetzer Hara doesn't mean that they do. I see very often people do this to great people, talking about true Gedolim, and they can't comprehend that they're on a higher spiritual level than them. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, I see even more the same thing when people read the Torah. They read story about Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Yehuda, David, all these stories, and they say, oh, I would have been attracted to that pretty woman, so David was attracted. I think that's a very, very simplistic way, because you have to understand these are not regular rabbis or regular people with regular Yetzer Haras. These are people from 4,000, 3,000 years ago that were on a completely different level that we can't imagine. So it's a very fine balance. And if I'm being honest, not many people have this balance, which is being able to keep it real. And if you see somebody doing something wrong, it's wrong, but also not judging everybody on the same level, right? There was a story in Gateshead. No, not a big story, but there was a mashalach. There's people that collect money, and he came and he was taking coffee from a coffee machine like that, and we had a pool. Don't worry, I need my coffee anyway. No problem. So we had like a bowl of sugar, and like normal people, they take the sugar and then they take the coffee, right? You don't put your dirty coffee spoon in the sugar. It's one guy that was collecting. He was a little bit smelly and a little bit all over the show. and he was looking at the sugar and he wasn't taking it, and I said to him, "Why are you not taking sugar?" He said, "I'm worried that somebody put the dirty spoon in the sugar." And I said, "Why would anybody do that?" "I don't know. Are you sure no one did that? You sure? You sure?" And then suddenly I realized, because he's the type of person that would do it, he thinks everybody else would do it. It's a terrible way. But we all do this to some extent. We paint everybody with the same brush. But what's it called again? There's a saying in Hebrew, I forgot it now, where everything I see in myself, I see in other people, it's just a reflection of me. There's many sayings like that in English as well. Kol haposel b'mumo posel. Very good. That's exactly it. Yeah. And it's very true. So, it's one thing to do it to another person. It's another thing to do it to a Torah giant, it's tzaddik. And it's another thing to do it to Torah level people and say, "Oh, I, would have done this and therefore he done it." So it's very important just so we know. Anyway, so I think that's a very important fundamental of faith in Judaism, where Yiddishkeit in general is not blind faith in by any stretch of imagination. It's not blind faith in Hashem. It's not blind faith in humans. However, there is a mitzvah to have emunah. There is a mitzvah to have belief, which is a question in itself. How can you tell me to believe? If I don't believe, I believe. But the answer is it's not too hard. It's work to believe. Mm-hmm. So, for example, if I'm doing a PhD and I'm trying to prove a study, the correlation between, I don't know, people that wear hats and taller people, I'm going to have to do the study to make myself believe it. So same thing we say with emunah. Of course, if a person doesn't look into it, then they may not believe it, they may yes believe. But we do have an obligation. It's one of the 13 principles of faith of the Rambam. But according to everyone, it's a mitzvah. It's the first one of the 10 commandments. We have to believe. And we're not allowed to believe in any other God. And we have to work to make sure we believe that. Logically. So it's a very fine balance. Anyway, so that is just an introduction to, I guess you can call it naivety in Judaism. Right? Naivety in Judaism. And I don't like talking about this in a binary, simple way, because it's not simple. By the Hasidim, for example, and by the Sephardim, they are more blind faith to their leaders, right? The Hasidim, their Rabbis go from parent to child, right? From father to son. And the question is like, what's the chance that of the whole, let's say you have 10,000 Satmar Hasidim, right? What's the chance out of all of them, the most perfect one for the job was the son, right? In most circles, definitely in politics and most leadership, you don't go over father to son. That's a dictatorship. That's a kingship. We don't do that. But in some circles, and specifically by the Hasidim and a little bit by the Sephardim, you can look at some families, it goes over parent to child. And that has to do with a certain simplicity, which is we're not going to judge and look around and see who's the most appropriate for the job. Instead, we're going to take, the dynasty, the family. And, for them, it works. People like to throw shade on different groups. For them, it works. And it's amazing. But for most of us, it's we are critical, and you should find somebody that you respect and
I think that the story about Moses with the two his sons, none of them was continued.
Right, and that is how it always was. If you look at 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, the time of the Rambam, time of Goen and Rishonim, in some cases, their children, were more poised to become leaders. If you look at Rabbi Gamliel, Rebbe, the time of the second destruction of the Second Temple, yes, you had a couple generations when you had Rabbi Gamliel, Rebbe Yehuda Hanassi, where they did take over. But in most cases, we don't know anything about Rabbi Yosef Karo, the author of the Shulchan Aruch, his son. We don't know anything. Ramesh Yisraelis, I don't think he had any sons. But the Vilna Gaon's sons, then it's it. I mean, any of these Torah scholars, they didn't go to their sons because they obviously weren't. Sometimes, very rarely, yes, but that is the default method of leadership in Judaism. But it's not to throw shade on other groups that don't do that, especially Hasidus. Because for them, it works. That's, when Hasidus came out in the 1700s, most of European Jewry were opposed to Hasidus, not necessarily because of this, but just the whole movement in general was almost like dumbing down the Torah, which is like, just everybody have a good heart and shake and shuckle and sing and that's the main thing that counts, as long as your heart's in the right place. Whereas all the Litvaks here, if you want to call them the German Yekkish Jews, they were very detailed, and all the details matter. And it reached a point where the the Gaon of Vilna and others, they literally ostracized that group, and they said, "Oh, but now it's become clear that for them this is how it works." And I have many friends that they've joined Hasidic groups because for them this didn't speak to them, the black and white, dryish, more dry. So they go there. So anyway, I was in Breslov in Uman for Rosh Hashanah with 30,000 Jews about 10 years ago. And it's not my thing. It's not. I'm not that type really. Other than the singing, I like the singing. But I saw the appeal. The majority of the Jews that go there, I wouldn't say the majority, but probably about 10,000 of the Jews that go there are not observant at all. But they don't keep anything. But Rosh Hashanah, when they go there, they keep it because they can connect to it. Everybody wears whatever they want. There was a minyan on Rosh Hashanah day with the shofar blowing in the street behind an ambulance on Pushkina. There's a main road there, Pushkina, in the middle of this town of Uman in Ukraine. Because some people, that's the way they roll. You know what I mean? And I went to a minyan where there was 5,000 people in one room, and the noise was unbelievable. It was just like, wow, it feels like heaven. It was like, so I could see the appeal of it. So you got a lot of rabbis that say, no, to go there is forbidden. It's like a pilgrimage. We don't do that in Judaism. And yeah, for most people, you probably shouldn't go. But for people that's how they connect to Judaism, we applaud it. It's not against halacha. It doesn't disobey. There's a different problem where all the men go and they leave their wives behind and the families behind. And, it's also not great. So I'm not endorsing it. I went there just to see and have the experience. But it's important to know that there's different groups and nobody's better or worse. In the olden days, they had the 12 tribes. Each one had their own job. Sachar, Zevulun was a typical example. They would work and they would learn and they supported each other. And then you had the fighters in Yehuda, and then you had the tribe of Levi who worked in the temple, and everybody had their own role. So why, what's wrong with that nowadays? Again, as long as it's within the parameters of halacha. Okay, it's what's just finished this discussion a little bit. What's important to realize, I know this a lot because I grew up Sephardi. I am Sephardi, but I also grew up Ashkenazi, and I'm kind of confused. But I see all the time the qualities of both. In the yeshiva world, which is very like intellectual, black and white, the Sephardim I'll look down at to some extent. There's a derogatory name. You'll know this, Franks, right? You're familiar? And it's like, the Sephardim, they're a little bit simpler. And it's the same way, by the way, in the political system in Israel, where there are those that accuse the whole system of being effectively systematically racist against Sephardim, because they say, well, look, 99% of the judges, or maybe even 100%, are all Ashkenazi. Look at all the prime ministers. I don't think there's ever been a Sephardi prime minister. Maybe one, maybe Katza. I don't even know if there's ever been a Sephardi prime minister. And they basically say, has there ever been? No, right?
אבל היה נשיא פרסי.
נשיא פרסי, who?
נו, מה שמו? משה...
קצב? No.
כן.
משה קצב? He was Sephardi?
הוא פרסי.
Wow. So I'm saying, and I know people that they said, I don't agree with that. I don't think the state of Israel is designed. I think it's just the natures of people is that Ashkenazim get those types of jobs, whatever it is. But the point is, like, there are different types of Jews, and I think Sephardim and Ashkenazim are wired differently. If you ever go to the Sephardi shul, no disrespect to this, the tefillahs are beautiful. Everybody's singing together, the whole Kabbalah Shabbos, and the kids are singing, they're joining in. It's like it's an amazing, amazing thing. And the respect for the rabbi or the rabbanim is something next level. So yeah, maybe the Torah level of Ashkenazim, and when they're learning depths of Gemara is deeper, but everybody has their own thing. So then the tefillah of Ashkenaz. So every group has their own strengths and their own weaknesses, but it's it's not up to us to decide who's better or who's worse or who's right or who's wrong. Anyway, okay, so we'll just finish. We're trying to wrap this up this week so we can get to the thing. When we look at mitzvahs, I've spoken about this before about a year ago, but when we do mitzvahs, people often ask, well, why do we do mitzvahs? It's probably the most common question as a rabbi. Why can't I have meat and milk? Why can't I have things? Now, you'll have some people that will tell you because it's unhealthy, because this and that. Ultimately, most of these types of mitzvahs, like meat and milk, like thing, we just don't do it because Hashem told us not to. Right? If you go down the healthy route, first of all, you're wrong because it's not unhealthy. And there is some element of like, well, pork that's undercooked could be dangerous and all that. It's not why we don't have chazir pork. Simply put, it does spiritual harm. It does spiritual harm. Eating non-kosher does spiritual harm. How do we know that? Because God told us not to eat it. And even if He were to say it doesn't do any spiritual harm, how do I know it, by the way, it does spiritual harm? Because our sages bring down that it's metamtem esalev, that the spiritual heart gets timtum, I don't know how to say it, poisoned to some extent. But again, we do it simply because Hashem told us. However, all of the logical mitzvahs, so those are called chukim, right? They're non-logical, maybe edot, but they are. Well, actually, no, they're not edot. Edot are the mitzvahs that are a sign or a symbol or a testimony for something. Like the Yom Tov. A Yom Tov is a testimony for whatever we're celebrating, commemorating. But either way, this is a non-logical mitzvah. And by the way, some mitzvahs were specifically made to be completely illogical. So, for example, the typical example is paraduma, the red heifer. That the one who sprinkled it would become impure. The one who had the water sprinkled and then would become pure. And the whole thing was deliberately made to show that impurity and purity is in the hands of Hashem. And we can think that we have the logic behind it, but we don't. And therefore, that's a chok. That is a mitzvah that we don't understand. King Solomon, the wise of all men, said even he had no reasoning for the mitzvah of the mechanism about how the red heifer worked, back then when they had it. But anyway, so however, there's so those mitzvahs that are kind of just illogical, we do them because Hashem told us not to. And the next question I always get was, well, why should I do it if I can't connect to it? So again, there is a very simple answer, which people don't like to hear, which is, again, God created the world. He is so vast, so infinite. If He says don't do something, you just don't do it. It's like a tiny baby not understanding why the parent says don't play with matches. Just don't. When you get older, you'll understand. After 120, we'll understand. So people don't like to hear that, but it's a true answer. That's why I say it, because I can bring you 101 answers why we shake the lulav and da-da-da-da. But ultimately, we shake it. And there are very nice reasons about the lulav, many. But ultimately, it's because Hashem told. Okay, other ones that are signs, Shabbos, tefillin, the Yom Tovs, they are symbol for something. However, the other type of mitzvah is mishpatim. Mishpatim are logical laws. Don't steal, don't kill, don't kidnap, whatever it is. Those are very simply made to, not just for us to keep and tick the box, but to make us into better people. Being kind and all those are what you can call super rational. All very, and that's why every civilization ever has established similar laws. They've never established any dietary laws, but they've established, well, sometimes there are some dietary, but not really. But they've established all these laws. Yeah.
It says, "Ele hachukim v'mishpatim." So if you go by the order, first it says chukim. These first we need to learn to obey. Okay, then we'll be able to get also the logical. I think so.
Yeah, there's a lot. That's a beautiful thing. The reason I always assumed is just because chukim are much harder, right? If you look around any given community, especially of less religious people, nobody's stealing, nobody's murdering, nobody's doing any of these things. But the other mitzvahs, eating pork or shellfish,
yeah,
I don't get it, so I'm going to do it. So Hashem says, focus on that first, because that's the harder one.
Yes.
The other explanation is because on a very, very deep level, when we do a mitzvah, even though we understand it, we're supposed to do it because it's a mitzvah. Which means, if I see a very poor person, I want to give charity, I shouldn't just be doing it to make I don't feel guilty. Let's be honest. Most people give charity because I don't want to feel guilty. Mm-hmm. My friend asked me, can I give him money to his campaign? I want to get him off my back, so I give him $20. I'm supposed to get over that. There's nothing wrong with that, by the way. Mm. It's fine. But a higher level is to act as if it's a chok. Even though it makes me feel good, I'm going to do it because Hashem told me to. And we can fool ourselves, but that is a very, very deep level. We learned that from Avram. Hashem told Avram, Lech lecha, go for yourself, you'll be rich, and you'll be this, you'll be that. And it says that this was one of the greatest tests of Abraham. Great test. You tell me I'll be rich. You tell me I'll have kids. You tell me that people will like me and bless me. So what's the answer? Because Avram, all of that, he didn't go for himself. He went because Hashem told him to. He had such a deep level of being able to do what Hashem wanted, even though he knew it would benefit him so much. So to some extent, we have to be able to copy that when we do mitzvahs, even the ones we understand. So that was one of the reasons why chukim and mishpatim, we have to act to the mishpatim as if they are also, at least aspire, as if they are also chukim. Okay, so I think we're going to finish over here. They had the last chapter of this all about relationships and the way Jewish marriages work and everything, but I don't think we have to get into that. So it's not too complicated. I think we're all on the same page. So, yeah. Any questions? Next week we'll go to Parasha. We'll move to less. Okay? So yeah, I know some of it was basic, some of it was interesting. We had good discussions, but hopefully it was all around beneficial, and we'll start.
It's interesting, Rabbi, I heard the word mitzvah, which is, we talked about it one time, that this is actually commandment, okay?
Yeah.
God command, but it also turned to be, during the history, like a good deed. It's a mitzvah to help. First of all, we need to remember this is a commandment.
100%. Yeah. It's funny. People use it as like mitzvah.
Yeah, it's a good deed.
The worst is when people take things which are not mitzvahs and they say they're mitzvahs.
Right.
It's like, oh yeah, it's going to be a mitzvah if you, I don't know. Most things are mitzvahs, normally good deeds and kindness, but sometimes people try to push an agenda, especially one which is against the Torah. Oh, it's a mitzvah to, I don't know.
Right.
Give you anything. So yeah. So 100%. Yeah, mitzvah is a tzivui, is a commandment. And of course, some of them we understand, but all of them we hopefully do because Hashem tells us to.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.